Thank you. So I think the first thing is, and this is really to strike home the point that Akiko made in her talk before, is the most important premise of any calcification modification strategy is to create a fracture so that the vessel can expand. Most people think of calcium as problematic in terms of getting your stent to where it needs to get to. But the problem is not just that, it's that when you put the stent in, if you can't expand the vessel because it's calcified, because it's a rock, then when you put the stent in, you're just going to make the lumen smaller because it's constrained by the calcium. So as Akiko showed you pictures in IVUS, this is a picture in OCT showing that if you have a fracture, you will get a bigger MSA. And just as she showed you before, that thinnest part of the thickness of calcium determines if you're going to get a fracture with a standard balloon-based approach. When it comes to both ROTA and Orbital, the idea here is not just to debulk the calcium as you're going in, but to thin it such that it will then subsequently fracture when you balloon it later with an NC balloon or after you implant the stent. So the system, and I wish we had a slide like this for the ROTA, but the ROTA has many of these things and is more familiar, is basically one where there's a wire, there's a pump and the generator that actually spins the device, and then it's a device that's handheld. And what was nice about this, and this was mentioned in a prior talk, whenever you have competition, it's a good thing. And so actually ROTA had existed the way it existed for a long time. When Orbital came around, that's when the pedal went away and everything became in a single hand-based approach. That's where the console got smaller and it could come into the room faster. And so it actually has made ROTA better to have this system around as well, which is, I think, a good thing. The wire that's used in this case is basically a nitinol-based wire. There have been iterations not just to this wire, there's also iterations to the ROTA wire. Sanjog mentioned the ROTA wire drive. So both of these wires are now much more torqueable than the old wires used to be. The initial Viper Wire Advanced that came out with the CSI system is a very, very stiff wire with a lot of wire bias. The one now that is used in almost all the coronary applications is the flex tip wire, which basically allows you to not have as much wire bias when you're going with orbital atherectomy. And as Sanjog mentioned, the tips of these are better so that you can sometimes even just primarily wire with this device. Now, most people think about rotablator as a front cutting drill that you go through and you want to make a hole. The mechanism of Orbital is different. So there's no front cutting drill. What this is actually this weighted thing that will sort of sand the vessel in the inside and basically get a bigger lumen that way. Because it orbits, it's only a 125 device, but can get up to a 175 lumen. So you only need the single device. You don't need to use multiple devices in the coronary. There are bigger devices. Those devices are used in the periphery, but for coronary use, this is the only one that's needed at present. When you look at how this works in terms of mechanism of action, it's different from rotablator and it's different from things like IVL as well, because with rotablator, you're making a channel and the channel you get is the size of the burr. You then need balloons to do additional work. But if you thin the calcium sufficiently, then the balloons would work fine. With Orbital, you not only get that channel, but you get a bigger channel because it's orbiting around as well. So there's not only the sanding, but there's forces against the wall that can have some effect as well. With IVL, you know it won't make the channel. It has to get through to where it needs to get, but then it can fracture in a bigger vessel as well. So there's a variety of differences between these techniques, and that's the reason why I think that you need to kind of know about all of them because they're complementary. So this is a slide that I've put together, and this was just published in Eurointervention, that compares and contrasts orbital with rotational atherectomy. The orbital system is a single device, just 125. It has 6 French compatibility, so you can actually put it through a guide extension as well, which is useful for radial operators. In general, when you do these ablations, because you'll see the speed of the flow is much faster, you tend to get less no reflow and problems like that. And then you can use a glide assist feature, which Sanjog will demonstrate. There's no gas setup with this. It's just all electrical and plugged in. For ROTA, you can front cross. So that means that if you have an uncrossable lesion, it's very effective. If you're in the subintimal space, it's probably safer because it's not orbiting around. If there's severe angulation and bias because it's a straight shot, that's advantageous. And then if you need a very big burr, it has that option as well. And in terms of cost, the single device typically, at least in the United States, is cheaper than that of Orbital. Now, but the key point is that either device can be used in most cases of severe calcification. And so I actually think it's better to have familiarity with both rather than just one. Now, a general rule of atherectomy, would you atherectomize this lesion? Because a lot of people are scared of atherectomy because of cases like this. But if you think about it, this lesion is so tortuous and so angulated that no atherectomy device is going to be safe to use in this particular circumstance. And the way I can show you that is with the wire in. I've now traced the wire. This is the course of the wire, but the vessel goes like this, up and down. You can't see my pointer, actually. Sorry about that. Now you can. Basically, the vessel goes up and down, and the wire goes like this. So what do you think is going to happen when a device comes this way? You're going to get a perforation. And that's exactly what happened, and that would happen with either orbital or rotational atherectomy. So you have to have good clinical judgment in using these technologies in the right way. So how do you treat serial lesions? And then I will go to the model because it looks like it's set up now. This is the case of a left main. This is a case where there's an OM lesion as well. And so the idea was with a single device to be able to treat this. And so the microcatheter wouldn't actually cross that distal lesion. So what I ended up doing is getting the microcatheter wedged to this point here. Let me drag this mouse over to this point here, and then free wired the rest of this with the Viper wire. So it's that type of wire that you can do. And then the idea is to use low and high speed at this left main area here, to then not ablate this segment here, so to glide assist through that, and then to ablate this segment here with only low speed, because high speed would potentially be too risky at that point. So low and high, glide assist, and then low. And this is what it looked like after we did orbital atherectomy, better result. But the idea here is to just thin the calcium, debulk it so that then the balloon can do its work, and that's basically what we did. Pre-dilated, cracked the calcium, and then after that, put in stents, and I'm not going to show you the stents or the IVUS at the end, but this was the final angiogram that's being done. So maybe, Sanjo, you want to demonstrate now what the system looks like. If we can get the camera zoomed in on him and then switch the feed to that, then we'll be in good shape. Right before he goes, I also want to just point out that at TCT this year, we'll be presenting a 2,000 patient trial of orbital atherectomy versus conventional balloon angioplasty, so stay tuned for that.